Hey, good morning, Dev. How are you? How is London today?
Morning, Norman. London is doing just well. We keep ourselves healthy despite the really challenging situation all around us.
Yeah, I guess you guys have a recurrence of COVID as well, right?
That's right. Unfortunately, she's back, and we just have to keep our heads down, keep our chins up, keep our distance from our friends and family and our colleagues. But yes, heads up, chin up.
Well, best of luck to you guys. And why don't we get going with the interview? You have a fascinating business. So I have a couple of questions for you. Let me start with one, which is, what does it mean when you say that you're going to bring AI to the construction or the infrastructure industry? How do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, firstly, I mean, what do we mean by bringing AI? We're essentially, in much simpler words, we're just trying to improve the quality of decisions that are being made in this industry. And how we do it happens to be with AI, right? But I like to think of that as the mechanism rather than the outcome. The outcome is that we are seeking is far better decisions that happen in this industry. And specifically for what we do, we take data from previous construction projects, teach an algorithm to understand what was planned to happen on these projects, then what actually happened on their schedules. And then with that, you're capable of actually forecasting what might go wrong next on future projects. So we can tell project managers and help project managers and project directors and executives how to make better quality decisions on their projects. Like, which projects should you sanction? If you're sanctioning the project, then what might go wrong with it? How long do you think it actually might take to get this thing done?
Yeah.
And so we can really help with that.
I mean, for me, that's really interesting because that helps with political decision making, I suspect, as well. Because, when I was just writing a piece yesterday, I'll send it to you and get your comments. But, one of the things that I think is wrong in the US with infrastructure decision making is that, the way I was trying to articulate it is we expect our public officials to make the big decisions for our future, but we won't allow them to make mistakes. And infrastructure is always going to have cost overruns and always going to have time overruns. And so that freezes everything and it makes it a lose-lose proposition for politicians. So that seems really interesting from your point of view.
Yeah, I can perhaps speak firsthand because prior to my my life at nPlan, I worked directly into the UK government. And I've seen firsthand how hard it is to make these decisions when you're in a political environment. And it's one that, whilst I will not take sides and try and favor public officials, they just have an impossible problem in front of them, right? It's like, these aren't people that are purposefully trying to mislead the public on these projects. They just don't have an ability to figure this stuff out. And then they get the baton and get beaten for like, look, such a big disaster. And you're like, man, poor guy poor girl didn't even have a way of making that decision at the time, right? Tough calls.
No, very interesting. I mean, you saw that the largest PPP, I think, in the U.S. was just canceled a couple weeks ago. The Maryland Purple Line. So it gives you an example. Listen, give me a sense of your background. You just mentioned that you have a public sector experience, which is, I think, important for infrastructure to be able to see both sides. But what's the rest of your background? Just to help our listeners and our viewers understand who this guy is in front of us.
Yeah. I like to think of my background as how I used to change clothes in different careers, because I literally used to wear different clothes in my different careers. I started my career at Shell wearing fireproof clothing, so coveralls. Yeah. And I used to be on the pointy end of delivering large projects for the group. Lived and worked on 4 different continents, from Sakhalin Island off the coast of Russia to East Texas, right? All delivering projects for the group. I did that for 9 years. and my uniform or clothing was fireproof, which is nice and easy when you wake up in the morning and you know exactly what you're going to wear. Then I had to, I put that set of clothes aside, and I bought a suit, and I went and worked in the government. So I took my knowledge in project delivery and engineering and set it aside and got into politics, which was a total left field step. But what I did in government was I helped the UK government, that is, I helped write the national strategy on artificial intelligence. In fact, I led it, which got published in September of 2017. And what we in the government at the time used to feel like setting this 10-year strategy for the country is like basically setting our ambitions for the next space race. And we were competing against gigantic economies like China and the United States in making sure we don't get left behind as the UK. And nPlan is this genesis. So again, I changed my clothes and now I wear like polo shirts and t-shirts to work every day. And nPlan is a genesis of these two worlds, right? Which is, I saw how hard it is to deliver projects while I was at Shell. I saw this incredible opportunity in machine learning, and I also saw how hard it was for the public sector to make these kinds of decisions. And if it was hard at Shell to deliver projects, it was 10 times harder for public sector to deliver projects, right? And then I was like, you know what, I need to leave, take a step back for a second and try and think of this in a different light, which is where nPlan came from.
That's phenomenal. That's a great story. That's a great way to think about it. And I think it helps infrastructure people believe you because you've actually been on the front lines of building big projects. That's, I think, really important. Listen, you know, one of the things that'd be interesting to get your comments on, a friend of mine said the other day that this year he's seen more change than any other year in his life, and not even counting COVID. But he actually sees this as the slowest change year for the rest of his life, because change is starting to happen so rapidly, and you're on the front lines of that issue as well with artificial intelligence. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. I fully agree with your friend. I see that as well. You know, and I can give you a little story of that story and evidence of that change firsthand. When Alan's my co-founder in the business and the CTO of the company, when we started this 3 years ago, the first reactions we got was, nah, you can't do that. And then we're like, we're gonna try, right? We're gonna push through this, and even if it doesn't work, we'll go find other jobs, hopefully.
Right.
And so there was this general denial that technology could even be applied to solve a problem like this. We then saw in a year forward from there, so call it end of 2018, early 2019, we started to see maybe this could work. And then you come into 2020 and we absolutely need the service to go live on hundreds of projects across, you know, billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars worth of capital being deployed. And you're like, man, this journey is insane. Like just not even a few months ago, the same people were saying, you know, this kid is just talking crazy stuff. And now they're demanding the service.
That's great.
And that pace of change is not just because they're being influenced by external market circumstances where infrastructure delivery is getting increasingly put onto scrutiny for its failures in delivery and its volatility, but also because these individuals have started going through socioeconomic change that allows them to think about this. This is like the same people. I think about my dad as like, you know, one of the people that I've got to see go through socioeconomic change, where my dad now digests news that Apple News gives him and recommends to him, right? And before, he would pick up the paper and open the paper, and that's the only news he knew how to read.
Right.
And when I think about that, I see that happening inside a lot of our customers, where they start to demand better quality insights. Why? Because they're getting it in their daily lives. They're getting it in their social lives. They're getting it across all the other services that they receive, call it outside of the construction industry. But why is it that my job, the thing that we do every single day, is still so far behind? And that socioeconomic pressure pushes people to start making change. And to further that, your friend said that this is still going to be the slowest rate of change we've ever seen. And that's because as mankind, I firmly believe that we are an insatiable species that can never be satisfied with what we've currently done. We're always ambitious to do bigger and better, right? Which is what makes infrastructure such a cool part of the world, is that we want to push the boundaries of what infrastructure can do for us. And so I see this change in, let's start making better quality decisions using data, using mechanisms that we previously were not doing. Let's call it today. And then going forward, it's like, what are the second order effects that come from this? So where I go with these levels of thinking is that I think in the months and years in front of us, we'll start to see systemic change happen in the form of the way these projects are financed, the way that finance is even generated, shifting away from structures that we see today into slightly more capitalist mechanisms that are socio-capitalist mechanisms that allow more ubiquity and more democratization of this infrastructure, so that these good quality decisions end up coming from citizens, and citizen connectivity to the financing of infrastructure becomes something closer, right? Which is intrinsically what you would imagine happening, because people care about their infrastructure. I care that the road around my house is junk. It's like falling apart, right? And I want it fixed because I care. And I'm not alone. There's like 9 billion other people that think like me.
No. So 2 points I would make, which is interesting. I care about my water quality, but nobody will ever tell me what it is.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? Right? I mean, and lack of information is a big deal, and it hurts, harms the impulse to actually invest. But the other point that's really interesting as I listen to you is that I think what's going to happen, what you're talking about, I think is making sure high quality information is available throughout an organization. Because I remember asking somebody in a public venue maybe 2 years ago, actually it was the executive search guy who's pretty much the #1 guy in global infrastructure. I said, how many people do you know who can manage a mega project? And he said, I could count the people on my right hand, right? I mean, maybe 5 people who could really manage a global mega project, which is a fascinating insight. I mean, that causes problems for an industry that creates maybe 70,000 projects a year.
Yeah, we need that number to be 70,000, right? Not 5.
Right. Exactly.
And it's you can't these 5, or maybe if we push it 10 mega individuals that can do mega projects. How do we empower others to get to that position, right? It's not it's not conceivable that we're going to get there by just whatever we've done so far.
No, it's super interesting. Listen, a sort of a different level question. How has lockdown affected the way you manage your business? And what's sort of, are there any surprising and positive effects?
Yeah, so lockdown, and call it the pandemic in general, has been positive for our business. One, structurally, we are a decentralized team in that, it was between one day and the next, we were remote. We went out of an office into a remote environment. And yes, there were some mental strains on individuals to take that adaptation, but generally speaking, we are a very technology-driven company, and therefore making that adaptation was somewhat simple, or in relative terms simple, I would say. In terms of like the positive effects, at the core of what nPlan does is we're modeling risk, time risk, right? We're trying to tell our clients, this is what probably might happen to your projects. We're modeling risk, including tail risk. And COVID is is often referred to as a tail risk event. It had a very low likelihood of happening. This gets debated in lots of other forums, so let's not debate the likelihood of COVID. But previous to it occurring, it had a low likelihood and a very high impact. That's known as the tail, right? So far right probabilities of occurrence. And then it happened, and we're like, oh, everyone caught by surprise, global economy surprised. What that meant for us as nPlan is loads and loads of our clients and clients that we had never even heard of started approaching us, which is, can you help us quantify risk? Because we clearly don't know how to do that very well right now. You know, we just got slapped in the face with this thing called COVID. Right. And our answer is yes. I mean, that's literally our bread and butter. We're not like reinventing a new company to go do this stuff. We've been doing it for 3 years now. Right. So we actually had a tremendous uptick in interest, but also in delivery, right? Getting customers into the door and our product out into the hands of these customers that they can actually start making these, unlocking these insights so that they can better handle future tail risk events, which, you know, no doubt something else, and whilst I don't hope for this, in probability terms, some other bad thing is going to happen to our planet at some other point in the future.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's good that it's great that it's had a positive impact on your business. You know, one of the things you mentioned earlier is the issue of funding infrastructure projects, and you see that changing. I wanted to get some insight from you on the fact that the infrastructure industry produces an enormous amount of data, especially if you describe the infrastructure industry broadly, just the data that comes out of automobiles, of vehicles, of a Tesla, right? Where, you know, you gain 3 pounds and all of a sudden you get an email talking to you about a diet program. How do you see the value of that data evolving, and what are the mechanisms? Because, you know, for me, we're doing an event, and I'd like to invite you to participate in, but it's on the 28th, and one of the panels focuses on, you know, gasoline data. How are we going to power the next infrastructure revolution? And the point there is that in the US, we've built our infrastructure off of the gasoline tax, at least our transportation infrastructure. You know, there's an opportunity to look at data in that way, selling directly to consumers, the public sector, or a data tax as well. How do you think about the value of data, and what are your thoughts in terms of where that's going? Because the infrastructure industry really doesn't seem to appreciate the amount of data that's produced.
Yeah, and look, you know, at nPlan, we only process one type of that data, right, which is schedule data. Right. Tons and tons and tons of this stuff already exists, and we're tapping into it. The first thing to say about data is that data is sort of like crude oil, right? Which is like kind of useless unless you know how to refine it. And refine it is probably the mechanism we would say is how to interpret that data and how to make meaningful sense of it. You know, there are these billions of sensors in the construction and infrastructure industries that are producing billions and billions of points of data on like what's going on these assets. But if you can't figure out how to do something with that data, it's kind of useless. Like, there's no point having it. I would go so far to say that. Now, it is a matter of time before more companies like nPlan start leveraging more of that data that exists and start doing something clever with it, right? Effectively, if you oversimplify what we do, we just took data that already existed, did something really clever with it, and now have found a really valuable and monetizable mechanism for it. So going forward, I think more businesses will emerge that can take this data. I think as that happens in parallel and in simultaneous behavior, the people that generate this data will start to value it more. They'll start to demand better services of it. They'll start to demand better contracting terms. They'll start to require it in a way. So I think of it as a flywheel, that as more and more data becomes interpretable, sorry for the big words, the value of data in general will start rising, and the demand of that data will start rising with it. I don't truly imagine in the next 15 years a state of ubiquity here. there's just going to be more and more and more data coming up, and more and more and more cool ways you can bring and slice and combine and create cool value out of it.
That's really interesting. That's phenomenal. That's a great way to end, I think, as well. Anything else you'd like to add? Because it's been, for me, it's always interesting talking to you, Dev, but this was a really enlightening set of answers to the questions and really good insights. So thank you so much.
Not at all, Norm. The only thing I'd close with is saying, I started by saying the thing that we want to do is try and improve decision quality. The outcome we want to see through improved decision quality is improved confidence in investing into the infrastructure markets. We believe that through better quality decisions, better insights, we as an economy can invest an additional $1 trillion of capital with ease, right? How do you just get people to invest another $1 trillion of capital? You do it by giving them the confidence, and you do that through these mechanisms that we hope to be inspiring the world with.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, and congratulations on your business.
Thank you, Norm.
Talk to you soon.
See ya.